Well, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. The Richmond Council's Community Conversation Roadshow continues, and here we are just after our summer break on a kind of final lap, doing some of our final high streets. My name is Paul Clement. I've been asked to facilitate this evening and then chair the Q&A session. I'm independent. I don't live in your area, but I do come with a bit of experience of high streets, and I'm going to try and give you some background in terms of what may be going on, not just on your high street, but high streets across the country. So you're going to get your chance this evening to give your council your views on what ought to happen on your high street as it continues to evolve in this post-COVID era. But before I do that, we're going to hear from a number of councillors, or from one councillor, about a number of initiatives that are going on in your area. So let me, and I'm not sure they're all here, but let me just see whether, first of all, do we have Councillor Richard Baker, who is the lead for business and economics? Richard, are you here? Well, it's okay, he sends his best wishes anyway. Councillor Rita Palmer, who is one of your local ward councillors. Hello, Rita, say hello to everybody.
Paul, Councillor Palmer, well, Rita is definitely coming tonight. I know I can see Rita with her. Screen. Oh, no, you can see her.
Oh,
okay,
no, I can see her. I think she's trying to unmute herself. In
That's
the meantime,
right. I've done it. Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening, and we may hear from you later. Welcome, Councillor. And then finally, then Councillor Paul Hodgins, who is going to give us a bit of an update in terms of what is going on in your ward. Paul, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. And it'll be an interesting session, a different one for us tonight. But it'd be great to see how it works and to get into more detail on the high street. Councillor Brandreth Afra sends her apologies tonight. She couldn't be here. She had an important family meeting tonight. But Rita and I will do our best to cover those issues up front and then later on in the questions. But let me just go over a number of the major things that are happening. If I've missed anything, Rita will chime in, and also we've got questions at the end which we can address as well. So just to give an overview of some of the key things that obviously we're concerned about and working on and talking to residents about. Of course, you know, the biggest issue for Barnes, as always, is the bridge. And as everybody knows, finally it's opened back up that we can get across, either walking or cycling, which is great. That last year has been a real struggle for people, and it did it did impact lives quite a lot. So much so that, as a lot of people know, people were questioning whether they would continue to live in Barnes or not. So it is great news that it has opened up. Now, of course, we've got to look to the longer term, and all of that is still all of the questions have not been answered, and the issue is still being worked through. So just because it's opened up doesn't mean that the ferry has now gone away. The ferry is still being discussed between TfL, the Department for Transport, but also the planning application for the ferry, together with Richmond and Hammersmith and Fulham. And the reason why that's still being discussed is because it's not known yet whether it will be needed at some point if the bridge does need to close down again while the strengthening or stabilization happens. So they're continuing to talk about it and work that through in case it's needed. The stabilization work as a first level to just make sure that the bridge will continue and be safe. I'm told that we're almost there. The DFT is still waiting for the business case from Hammersmith and Fulham in order to release funding. But that is being discussed, and hopefully that is going to be very soon and any time. In terms of the longer term strengthening and deciding on what the final plan is and the options, and I know that the Foster Cowie design and solution is one that's being pursued by Hammersmith and Fulham. They have their expert Denton looking at the options and looking at in particular, and the DFT expects to hear by the end of the month, which we're almost at in terms of their analysis. So even though it seems to be quiet, and we as local councillors are not necessarily in the room any more than local residents are. We do continue in touch with the DFT and to get updates and push the case for us, and that of course, as always, needs to be accelerated. But progress, as slow as it is being made on that and on the details. Of course, we've got high street changes that are being planned and have consulted on, and of course we're talking about that tonight. So we won't go too much into that, and wanted to get people's views. But of course there are some changes in the plan in terms of loading zones at M&S, some pavement widening. There's the parklet that has been introduced at Church Road. And the parking with these changes will be affected, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Yep.
Can I just remind you, don't forget the new bus stop opposite Marks and Spencer's.
And of course, very important, the bus stop. That's right, Rita. Yeah, and in fact, that's a key key change. Both Rita and AFA are working as hard as can with TfL on some bus issues. There is the turning, hopefully for the 378 at Rocks Lane and Mill Hill. There's an issue with buses using Houseman Road for turning and also parking on Lonsdale. And really those with TfL, they're always good at talking. Not necessarily, it's not so easy to make changes there, but those things are being pushed. Rita's obviously working with the local police liaison group and the police on a number of issues. There's certainly been graffiti. There has been some concerning antisocial behavior. Recently, Station Road has been a real problem. Rita, did you want to add anything?
I wanted everyone to know the police have been quite firm in this statement. The highest priority, crime priority in Barnes Ward is drugs, but also running along in parallel with it is the theft of catalytic converters. And where I live on Barnes Waterside, I've been reporting break-ins this weekend, trying to steal coming into our underground garages. Catalytic converters are a high theft thing at the moment, but drugs is the big issue for the police.
Thanks, and I can confirm that because I've had my own catalytic converter stolen, which was a real problem. But that's a London-wide problem. And then just to move so we can get on to the order of business. Of course, people will know about the brewery. The brewery application was written. That is certainly not the end of it. The developers considering whether they're going to appeal or to modify their application. But one important thing, and just said, I will continue to be advocating for the school on night. I think it's very important for local area, very important in particular for students at Lowther School who are far away from Park Academy. The ULEZ expansion is coming 20th of October. Everybody needs to be ready for that. Make sure your car is compliant. And one key thing to know is, well, we're inside the zone, but so is the Townmead tip as well. So that's going to impact people. And then also today, there have been some local issues that have come out of the heavy rains at certain points over the last few months. So certainly got flooding that's happened in Barnes, and working with the council on how we can get the drainage better. And of course, a lot of people know there have been recycling and green waste collection and other issues that we're working on and pushing. Rita, just before we move, is there anything big that I've left out? We can come to it at the end.
Well, I think the usual complaint, fly tipping, rubbish, litter, the collection service from the council is not up to scratch. I get complaints all the time, every day, overflowing bins on the public bins, but also heavy fly tipping, especially around our council estate.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Well, we'll come back to questions, and so I'm back to you, Paul.
Well, thank you very much, councillors. And for everybody in the audience, you will have your chance at the end to ask your councillors anything that you want to ask them, well within reason. I'll facilitate that session. I mean, I have to say some fairly typical issues came through there, antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, but I've done this job for 15 years and never before have I heard that the theft of catalytic converters is an issue. So that's a real first for me. I'm quite interested in that. And Lisa Woodward has made a comment saying there's an issue with that actually at the London Wetland Centre too. But the police have been very supportive, so that is very good news. Right, okay, if you want to ask the councillors a question, then if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see there's a chat function. Make sure you chat to everyone, or you can chat directly to me and I will see your question. Either you can put question in there and I will try and come to you so that you can ask the question, or alternatively you can type the question and I'll ask it for you. And a lot of that is going to depend on the number of questions we have and the time that we have left. But as we've said already, this is a very different community conversation because it's got a single topic, which is what is going on your high street. And actually my area of expertise, having been involved in town city centres for the last 15 years, is more what on earth is going on Britain's high streets generally. Anything that you are seeing, trust me, every high street in the UK is seeing it to some extent and from a slightly different perspective. This is certainly not a local issue. It's certainly not a national issue. It is an international issue. But let me put one thing, let me lie one myth to bed before we start, which is what you are seeing happen on your high street, and indeed on Britain's high streets, is genuinely not a result of COVID. It's the easy excuse to say COVID is causing it, but I want you to trust me that an awful lot of what you are seeing now was already in train long before COVID. So actually it's more opportune to say we are where we are. We might have got there quicker than we would otherwise have got there, but what are some of the lessons that we can learn from the last 18 months? Without a shadow of doubt, the last 18 months have been truly devastating for local communities like yours. But actually, there have been some sunnier moments and some upsides. Haven't we all reconnected with our local places and with our local community much more than we did before COVID? I, for example, before COVID, probably could just about have spotted my next door neighbour in a crowd. But then I found myself standing on my doorstep clapping the NHS alongside them in a true spirit of camaraderie every single Thursday night. And that relationship has maintained itself. We've all started to value the local and our local community, local businesses particularly, and we want the local to succeed. And also we've travelled less, so we've spent more time locally. And the chances are that is going to continue in the future as well. Now, if you look at any retail studies or studies of retail at the moment, they all say much the same thing, which is we are going to have to get used to the fact that retail has once and for all changed, and it's going to form a lesser proportion of our high streets in the future. There are going to be less shops in less space, and we're going to have to find alternative uses as we move forward. Now, there's a whole raft of issues that lead to that. An awful lot of retailers were racked with debt going into COVID, and COVID tipped them over an edge they would have gone anyway. Debenhams is a good example. But they do carry high cost of occupation, business rates and so on. Their platform of trading is changing. We do all buy more goods online than we used to. You know, we can't blame retailers for this. We are the cause of this. Our habits have changed and retailers are having to adapt, and they can't adapt quickly enough. Out of town centres have begun to find a balance with high streets, and it could be a whole range of all of those things in truth, but we know that retail is going to feature less on our high streets moving forward. The second thing that started to happen is people have gone into the office less. Now, actually, for places like yours, that may have turned into a positive because people have worked from home more. And therefore, whilst they might have commuted into London, let's say historically, they're now spending their working and their leisure time more locally. But those habits are likely to continue, a kind of hybrid mix model between working at the office desk and working locally, not necessarily at home, but in the local environment. It'll definitely become more common, and that's going to mean we're going to spend more time in our locality. So there are some positive sides of this. What's also happened, and is now really starting to emerge, is that the identity and difference between places is becoming much more important. Think back 20 years to Britain's high street, any high street. If you saw an Iceland food, it could be in a brand new modern building, or it could be in an historic building, and it would look exactly the same. Retail became truly homogenized, and we quite like that. But now we really like to find things that are different on our high street, and we like to compare our high street with somewhere else. And in order to do so, we pick out those points of difference. And then the final thing is retail trends. Now, when COVID first hit, there was a huge speculation that people would move out of urban centres and into rural communities to be away from this appalling disease. To some extent, that did happen at the start, but actually what you've now found is we're back to where we were. People do want to live close to city centres, particularly in town centres close to city centres, and that is particularly true amongst the younger generations. So the fact that they're going to be living more locally and working more at home or around home, that's a different dynamic for your high street moving forward. Now, you during the discussion groups, the breakout rooms, you're going to come up with a whole series of different ideas, I hope, and I'm going to give you some framework for where we find those ideas in a while. But I just want to be honest with you and say there is no silver bullet here. And actually, the local authority, yes, they hold some of the solutions, but no local authority anywhere holds all of the solutions. And that's because it's a lot down to property owners and the use of land and buildings. Now, your local authority can bring people together. They're doing that tonight. They can really show leadership. They can try and form a strategy for the future. They can gain your consensus around that strategy. They can convene discussions, but they can't deliver everything. So we can't at the end of this try and say to our local authority, here's a long shopping list of stuff that we want you to do. Let us know when it's completed, because that is an impossible task. But what they have done is brought you together and allowed you to have your say. Now, this whole process started with a conference that I was lucky enough to be part of back in May. And there were some interesting conclusions that came out from that conference that if you weren't able to attend it, I just want to tell you what they were. The discussions were around the future of the high street, and we ended up with clearly 5 areas that participants thought were important. Let me tell you what those 5 were. The first was, we wanted our town centres to act as destinations. So whereas historically we had needed to go to our high street and our town centre, there was a feeling that need was no longer the case. We had to want to go there, and therefore they had to attract us to spend our time there. The second was, we didn't want homogenised town centres anymore, dictated to us by business. We wanted to have some influence ourselves. So people-focused centres was theme number 2. Theme number 3 was, it can't all be about retail anymore. And this is going to be a far more mixed environment, if you like, a more balanced footprint is what we're likely to see in the future. Theme 4 was, we want our local authorities, our landowners, our property owners and ourselves to be really creative, particularly about how we use vacant spaces. Let's not sit and wait for a retailer to replace the retailer that left a year ago. Let's think outside the box and repurpose those spaces. And then the 5th thing, which many saw at the start as being the reason that high streets have declined, was seen as the huge opportunity for high streets in the future, which was digital. So yes, I can sit at home and I can buy products on my sofa. I don't need to come into your town centre. But if my mobile device, my phone or my tablet, can bring that town centre to life and I can use it in a different way, then that suddenly was something that we should embrace in our future. We shouldn't wrestle against it. We should actually use it as part of our key strategy. So that gives you some background in terms of what I want you to discuss in the next half an hour or so. But what you are going to do this evening is going to truly matter. This isn't about you talking and the council ignoring. What they've asked me to commit to you is this, which is once we've finished all of these community conversations, there will be a consolidated report that will go into the normal committee cycle that will begin to tease out immediate and long-term strategies, not just for your town centre, but for all of the town centres in Richmond. And therefore it fits within the local planning framework. And to give us just a little bit more background into where our conversation this evening fits in the overall strategy, I'm going to ask Grace to take us through that process.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everyone. I'm here from Richmond's planning policy team to contextualise what we're talking about a bit and talk about the local plan and how the comments that you all make this evening are going to feed into that process. Is that clear for everybody?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So to give a bit of an overview of some of the areas of the council that influence the plan, I've kind of put this graphic together to show that it's not the planning policy team write the plan, and we also work with other council departments to help inform the decisions that we make and explore the impact of things like new developments. But this isn't just an internal process. At several stages, we'll be inviting the community and all of you to take part, as we know how knowledgeable you all are in your areas. And although Paul has mentioned this already, but there are many things that are out of council control. We do work with landlords and landowners to influence future developments, but there are factors like high land value and high demand for certain uses that do influence planning policy. So the local plan, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a legal document that's produced by every local authority in England. And essentially, this is a set of guidelines that sets out a vision and some objectives for how the borough will look like in the future. And a plan is often produced once every 10 years, so it covers quite a long time frame, and it's typically reviewed every 5. But in Richmond, we decided that the review should come a bit sooner to better reflect really pressing issues like the climate emergency, changes to central planning policy, including the new London plan, and also responding to the ambitious housing targets that are set by central government. So the local plan does not always adopt policies that are popular or fall in line with individual interests, but it aims to balance the needs of all members of society and users of places. For example, rather than dictate or operate specific jobs or services or shops, the local plan aims to create the conditions for those shops, services and jobs to thrive. So it is looking long term and ensure we're thinking well into the future. It's ensuring that we're placing developments in the most appropriate places. We can shape how places look and feel through design, how our urban centres are laid out and what street furniture there is, things like that. But what it can't do is influence rents or cap property prices, resist chain shops or control parking or how often waste and recycling is collected. And to give an example of what these plans might look like in daily life, I wanted to mention the 15 to 20 minute neighbourhood concept. And this is the idea that places should be complete, compact and connected neighbourhoods where people want to stay and where most of the things you need, such as shopping or cultural activities, things to do in the evening, are easy to walk or cycle to. And as we've discussed already, for many people, the pandemic has really highlighted the benefits of living locally and having access to these facilities that are nearby. So as well as there's 5 larger centres in Richmond, there are also over 30 local and neighbourhood centres and smaller parades across the borough, which are really important for top-up shopping, especially for those who are less mobile, don't have access to a car. So going forward, we need to make sure that we're supporting our local centres to be successful, distinctive places that can adapt to change, adapt to some of the challenges in retail, as we've heard, and also can help shape the way we shop in the future. But we also know that every area is very different. It's got its own unique set of challenges and contexts, or they might be thriving places, as I've seen in the chat that Barnes is. But we're very keen to hear your views on this so that we can make sure that we're writing the best policy in the local plan. Preparing the plan is a long process, which builds up weight and evidence as you go through the journey. And as part of this, the council also commissions new sets of research or local plan evidence to inform the policy. So this includes a review of open land designation, so how land is designated in kind of policy terms, as well as an urban design study to help us understand where the borough's realistic constraints are for growth, and to anticipate future needs for housing, as well as things like retail and leisure or business provision. So currently, the council are in the process of writing the first draft of the plan, or the Regulation 18 plan, and the consultation window for this is due to start in September 2021 to January 2022. And this will be an opportunity to input further into this process, so do keep an eye out on the usual council channels for updates about this. And just finally, we are setting a long-term vision for Richmond over the next 15 years. That reflects on some of the changes we've all experienced, but is looking really ambitiously into the future. We want to build on the borough's strengths as a place with strong arts, culture and leisure facilities that are enhanced by the unique presence of the riverside. And we want to work with our communities and local partners to ensure this vision is developed with you all. And I will see some of you in the breakout room to discuss this in more detail shortly.
Where I am sure you will get asked lots of questions about it. Thank you very much, Grace. Right, so don't forget, the next time I see you all will be just prior to the questions and answers to your councillors. So make sure you do use the chat function. I'll keep an eye on that through the next sort of half an hour or so. So what am I going to ask you to do when you go into the breakout rooms? Well, the way I'd like you to think and to act is, let's be positive, let's be constructive, but let's think differently and think big. Let's think about improvement. I've already heard in the chat function actually from Charles, who says, your high street is bucking the trend. It's successful and footfall has doubled in the last 5 years. And then Lisa says, lots of new businesses have opened in the last year. It's a very different picture to Richmond. There you go, give Richmond a dig. And a shout out, I think, for Emma, your town centre manager, who is exemplar, it says. Pay rise in the offing there, Emma. Right, so 3 questions I want you to debate. You can have about half an hour to do it, and each therefore is going to take about 10 minutes, okay? First question. What I want to know is, if your high street is doing so well, why is it doing so well? That's because you use it. So I want to know, how do you use it? How often do you go there? What do you go there for? Do you now visit more frequently, less frequently, or is it just for longer? When do you go? Is it daytime? Is it evening? When would you like to go that you don't currently go? So use of your town centre, number 1. Number 2, we want to know whether you can see anything that should be improved about your town centre. Now, some of you seem 100% happy with it, which is great, but I bet you've got ideas. Those ideas might be more green spaces, different kinds of shops, more leisure, more amenities, cycle lanes, more events, or whatever. And then thirdly, I want each group to start to think of an idea or a set of ideas which you think could really transform your high street in the future. Now, you've got to be realistic, but I am going to encourage you to think a bit blue sky and to think a bit different and to think a bit about the generations moving in and around your high street as well. So I'm not going to see you again. You're going to watch a video in a second. The next time I see you, you stay exactly where you are. We are going to move you into the breakout rooms. Those will be facilitated by a council officer and then back in to this main room in around about half an hour's time. But just before we start a video, and as soon as you see this video at the end, you'll move to your breakout rooms. I'll see you later on.
The high street, particularly in Barnes, is very community focused. I think it's quite a unique high street. You don't have a lot of big chain type places. There's a lot of independent businesses and everyone knows each other, both the other business owners as well as the people who live here, the residences. and we've got to know each other a lot better over the last year as well. So it's really come together.
Actually, I just moved to across the street because I was living in central London and I wanted to live in a more chilled place. And this area is just fantastic. It's family and it has all the options in the high street, so I really like it.
So I really like the green spaces. I feel like it's so helpful for everyone's mental health, just so you don't feel cooped up inside the house all the time. It doesn't feel like I'm in like a city, having all these green areas around.
Well, there used to be a lot more toy shops on the high street, selling unusual toys and children's clothes. There aren't many of those now, which is a shame because it's still a great place to bring up children, and my daughter's about to have a baby, so I would like to see more child-centred shops.
It's nice to have the farmers market. It's nice to have the little market they do on the Saturday sometimes here, but it's a shame Barnesville obviously has to be cancelled this year, but more things like that would be really nice. There was the food fair as well, which is lovely, but there could be more, not just the one a year, which I think would be nice.
Well, I think with the rise of online shopping, I think the high street purpose is changing. It's becoming much more about personal interactions. I think a lot of interesting shops out there, interesting businesses are making the entire industry about user experience, no matter what the main function of the business is. So I think we're going to see much more integrated entertainment, leisure, much more theatre, that sort of stuff happening in more day-to-day locations too.
Okay, well done. Welcome back, everybody. See, that was terribly painless, wasn't it? You got moved around and you didn't actually move yourselves. So there you go. Time travel and whatever is possible. So I spent a bit of time in all of the rooms and I'm by no way in the next 5 minutes am I going to give you an overview of what you all said. What I can assure you is that everything you've said has been A, recorded, and B, documented, and will be pulled together into that report that I talked about earlier. But let's kind of rush through. In the video we heard, one of the great things is that there's a lack of high street chains. We don't have some of that homogenization that other places have. And there's a good feeling amongst businesses. They want each other to succeed. They're not competing with one another. They're competing as a location. It's a really chilled place, but there isn't enough family orientated shops. Food fairs and markets work well, and we need more entertainment, leisure and theatre. And then across the groups, people telling us that they had rediscovered Barnes, even though they'd actually lived there for many, many years. They certainly use the high street more. Customer service is absolutely key. In fact, one person told us that she drove her car during COVID outside the shops and the retailers put the goods in the back of her car for her. How marvellous. There is a strategy needed around shop fronts and particularly shop shutters. North Barnes is apparently completely forgotten at times, and we could use the Wetlands Centre for activities and cultural events, particularly in the evenings. There is less of a variety of shops, somebody else felt, and we needed more sensible bus routes that don't keep changing. It already felt like a 20-minute neighbourhood to some people, but others said that actually the food there is now rather expensive, but then others strongly disagreed. Somebody said that they had made great efforts over the years to create Barnes as a destination for others to visit, and some in other rooms were questioning had that strategy really worked. The High Street is a market, a meeting place. The parklets have gone down well. Breakout areas are to be welcomed, and we should do traffic-free days where there's no traffic on the High Street, and we replace it with a market. And there is a real opportunity for outdoor spaces and better uses. We need to do more research into how retailers are doing and how people are using their high streets, and there isn't enough for young people, particularly since this is the town that has the highest number of under fives of anywhere. We need to do more to push on with environmental improvements, green spaces and sustainability. Food waste, a circular economy was particularly mentioned by one group. And then another group was telling us that there are just too many Land Rovers and large cars, and 27% of people still do drive, and most of those Land Rovers and large cars are parked on double yellow lines outside Marks and Spencer. We need to encourage more people to bike. We need to widen pavements and welcome from a continental style outside seating, but also let retailers use the pavement space as well and not confined within their shops. We do need to look at congestion, somebody else said, and we're still too travel and traffic dominated. It sometimes feels like a car park, somebody said. We need to deter through traffic, and older people, though, they do need car parking spaces because that's the route, that is the way they do use the high street. We need to think ambitious, we need to think big, and we should look at sustainable transport across the bridge. And then I visited one group 3 times, and every time I visited them, they were moaning about the bridge, with one person saying, it's not architecturally important, it's not particularly delightful, we need to be brave, we need to knock it down, and we need to start again. So in terms of the councillors, Paul and Rita, come off mute for me, please. I'm going to start this process with one question. Are you serious about resolutions to the bridge? And don't you agree, actually, we should pull it down and start again? Paul?
So yes, we are very serious about it. I do lament the fact that we do not control it. It does impact us much more than it does those north of the river, and yet that is where ownership sits. And it means that that we're just not in control of how it's done. One of the things that I certainly will be pushing for, that is a proposal that I welcome, ultimately is to put the bridge into a trust, and that'll be better for Hammersmith and Fulham, and that'll be better for us, and we will be pushing that. Now, in terms of tearing it down, it's not so easy. I think there is a fundamental problem with having listed things being part of a fundamental transport system. It's not like a building where you can just you can gut it and you can have the facade. And I do think it's a problem because we're going to fix it now and then it'll be an issue. It'll be an issue in another number of years. And can you not do something that actually makes it a better bridge but preserves the character? Yes, I would personally be in favor of that. Yes, but every time I've brought that up, it seems to be a challenge at government level. But I would not object to that at all.
Rita, the bridge has got a sister bridge elsewhere in Europe, I think. It's been replaced 3 times. And now the best the council can do is try and get back the old bridge that was failing at the time. Would you knock it down?
No, I wouldn't actually. And I went to the original meeting with TfL, Zach Goldsmith, Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Brandreth. And this came up at the very beginning. And is it English heritage? Absolutely adamant, no way would the bridge come down. So I don't believe in banging your head against a brick wall. I'd rather get the bridge refurbished and remedied and up and going. But I agree with Councillor Hodgins, it's the way forward for the future. We must have a plan on how it's managed. I mean, at the moment, there are 3 Conservative councillors in Barnes. Barnes has had the greatest impact because of the bridge. Therefore, we 3 councillors have had the most complaints, inquiries, questions, all kinds of meetings to answer residents' queries. And we've not been able to give anything because we haven't had any communication from Richmond Council. So I think for the future, we must try and get Hammersmith and Fulham to work with Richmond Council, which means all the councillors. So all parties are involved in it. But really, Barnes is the one, as I say, who's been most impacted, and we've been left in the dark about what's going on. We did, when it reopened for cyclists and pedestrians, we knew no sooner than any of the residents, 5 o'clock on the Friday before it opened on the Saturday. That's not good enough. We should have a share in it. We should be partners in the management of the bridge for when it is repaired and open again. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you. No, that's good. I tell you what, I wish some of the other councillors here. I could have a real David Dimbleby moment with you blaming them and then blaming you and so on, couldn't I? Marvellous.
Well,
Right.
Yeah, we've already had many of those, Paul. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah, but I haven't been involved in them, and I love a good fight. Right. So apparently the second bridge I've been told is the Budapest Bridge.
That's right. I've been over it. Yeah.
Anyway, right. Okay, councillors, do you agree with the general feeling, which I think came through from all three groups actually, that even though we've got lots of green spaces and it's a beautiful place, the traffic laws need to be more strongly enforced, and those Land Rovers outside Marks and Spencer should be penalised or towed away? Paul.
Well, I do think the rules that are in place do need to be enforced. Yes, it is a difficult balance, and we do need to minimize as much as we can and when we're in the breakout room, and Raphael and I've had a number of discussions, and he's a cyclist and I'm a cyclist, and I do know that there are people who do need to access the high street by car, but we have to minimize that. And it is a difficult balance, and of course, and I'm a big fan of smaller vehicles, certainly. So like you said before, Paul, there's not a silver bullet to that problem, and I do love actually the parklet that's being put in, and I think it brings a lot of character and the ability to enjoy the high street, and I would like to see more of that. And yes, I think we do need to get enforcement and possibly better enforcement of the rules that are in place. Yes.
Okay, Rita, I'll come to you in just 2 seconds, because I'm going to let you respond to that, but I'm also going to ask you a different question. Charles saying actually that speeding on Lonsdale Road is a particular issue.
Oh, shocking.
Charles, Rita totally agrees with you. She completely agrees with you.
I've complained about Lonsdale Road.
And therefore, if that is the case, why has nothing happened? Whose fault is it that nothing has happened? Because you spotted the issue, to be fair.
Well, I think one thought came up at a time when I was discussing this probably a year ago, when I worked with the council on some of the changes to Lonsdale Road. I think it is a forgotten road. It's right at the end. You've got St Paul's School and there's the bridge, and it's like a forgotten part where traffic is concerned. But believe you me, I drive along it probably at least twice a day, and because I go onto the council estate to see people and check up on things. So I'm a frequent driver down Lonsdale Road, right up to the high street, and you've got tailgating all the way along, pushing you on. No, it is a problem.
Okay.
And sorry, Paul, I mean, the problem with Lonsdale is, I think everybody here knows, and I'm very, very much in support of 20 mile per hour, and I think it's the right thing. Problem with Lonsdale is it's so long and narrow that those people who are not inclined to stay within the speed limit then don't. I wouldn't like to see a bunch of speed humps along there, I think, and again, we just have to keep pushing for enforcement. And I never understand why the answer comes back that you can't enforce 20 mile per hour any worse than 30 miles per hour, and that's what we as councillors and community need to do.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Rita, can I just go back to a discussion that you had actually during your joint intro around crime, antisocial behaviour and so on. Has that got worse, do you think, during the COVID period, or is it worse now? And if so, again, what needs to be done about it?
I'm not so sure about the antisocial behaviour element, but definitely the police made it clear their priority for Barnes is drugs. And in fact, the next day I saw on what I call the Castleknock parade of shops, just before you get to the bridge. Do you know Tesco's with the car park? Tesco's petrol garage? You know that.
I don't know why I'm nodding, Rita. I'm nodding on behalf of everybody else, because no, I don't, but assume I do.
Well, it's that parade of shops leading up to the bridge. As I'm coming home to turn right to my flat, I could see there was a police raid. The day after the police meeting, 2 cars across the road, then one further on knocking on a door above one of the shops. That was a drugs raid. and that is the #1 crime problem at the moment in barns. But of course, borough-wide, we've got this catalytic converter problem, which is now beginning to be rife in barns. And I saw in the Richmond Twickenham Times last Friday, they caught what they said was the ringleader of this catalytic converter theft, because they said it was organised crime, big organised crime. But as we know, with drug barons, you get rid of one and someone else steps in. And I think it's the same with the catalytic converters. It's not put to rest. Somebody else is doing it now, and they're definitely attacking barns.
Yeah, right. Let me bring Sanchi. Sanchi, if you are there, come off mute for me. And if you can turn your camera on, that would be even better. Are you with me? Oh, there you are. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So you had a question regarding a recent map that was produced, which I'm interested in. Ask the councillors your question, please.
Yeah, somebody on my road WhatsApp group, which is a result of the pandemic, which has been quite successful, shared a map from the Evening Standard, which showed large parts of London being underwater as a result of climate change over the next 10 to 15 years, including all of Barnes. And I just wondered what we could be doing to mitigate that risk at this point, because I think probably some connections with flooding need to be included in the local plan.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
Sanchi, that is a very important question which comes up often. I did not see the article. Certainly I would have read it if I'd had the Evening Standard. But I live on an estate that comes into a Zone 3 flood risk. That is the highest.
I know.
And the house I sold at the start of Barnes Waterside estate, I moved down to the other end to live in a flat. I was very sad because the person who bought the house from me built a basement. And that's something I've been campaigning against all the time I've lived here, 25 years. But anyway, it's built and it's done. It's end of story now. But he had to go through all the criteria with the council, the planning department, and the Environment Agency. And if you can build a basement well, at the moment, then it says to me, well, they think it's okay. What can I do? My view doesn't count. I've campaigned against basements for years because of the risk of flooding. But I think it's a case of probably we'll have some sort of problem, disaster, and then people will sit up and take heed. But at the moment, Barnes is considered okay by the Environment Agency, as long as we've got the what do you call it? The
Thames barrier.
Yes, the Thames barrier. As long as that's working, I was assured a few years ago when all this came up that as long as that's working, we're okay. But it won't always be able to cope. That's the query. That's the worrying bit.
Paul, do you, one of the things that recent surveys have shown is that particularly amongst younger people, places that are doing their bit to reduce emissions and improve the environment and introduce green spaces and so on, and in this instance deter flooding, do better. They like them better. They want those places to work. Do you think we should be doing more here, or could we be doing more, and if so, what?
Well, I certainly think that that is one of the reasons why Barnes is already so attractive, and we need to keep doing it. It's because of the green spaces and the community, and people love spending their time in the area so much, and so these issues about how can we be improving our as we just talked about our high streets and our spaces where for people to come and stay. We definitely need to do that. There are of course the bigger issues about climate change and air quality being another one, and how we improve transport and how we clean up transport, especially from the bigger vehicles. I mean, the reality about transport and car transport is that 60% of journeys, not only done in big vehicles, but with only one person in the car, and most of the rest are with only two people in the car. And so the council, together with others, need to help encourage better vehicles and better usage for that. And so I think we are doing quite a lot, and we recognize the problem, and actually it's a cross-party thing at the council, and we need to keep pushing and keep trying to improve it. And so I don't think it's a lack of recognition of the issue, and we just have to keep finding improvements and solutions for it.
Yeah, and something actually that didn't come up this evening will be increasingly important, I think, is electric charging points. So, make it easier for electric vehicles to use your space. Now, Charles, where is Charles? Charles, come off mute and turn your camera on, sir, because he is about to give us a lesson in highway improvements, or I hope he is. Frankly, without him, I'm going to really struggle here. Charles, where are you there? Right, okay, here we go, Charles. Now, you have said that
had a couple of these, so
we should commission a study to remove the traffic lights at Church Road and Castle No. Is that right? Castle No? Castle Now?
Castle Now.
And introduce a roundel. Now, what is what Charles? What is a roundel?
Well, it's a I suppose a Dutch, initially a Dutch sort of concept, really, which is basically all the cars. In a way, it looks like a roundabout. It doesn't have to necessarily be circular, but people just come onto it. They slow down as they arrive, and then they just find their way slowly through the junction. There's very many examples now in the UK. There's one in Preston that's just gone in recently. A chap called Andy Cameron, who's very well versed in them all. There's a chap called Ben Hamilton Bailey who sort of specialises, very good one in Bodmin. And it basically slows all the cars down. They continue across very slowly. There's no sort of hold-ups in the approach to the junction. There's no traffic lights. There's obviously very low maintenance costs. And the whole, you give not much more space back to pedestrians, and also pedestrians can cross at will.
Right, so is the theory, I do apologise to everybody else, stick with me while I do my highways lesson, but very simply, Charles, is it really about you believe that too many traffic lights actually cause more incidents, slowing down, starting quickly? Is it about that? It's about smoothing journeys? Is that really what it is?
It smooths everything out. I mean, currently, of course, because the bridge is shut as well, people get very frustrated because the phasing of the traffic lights hasn't changed at all since, before the bridge shut. So there's just not the volume of traffic at all anymore. So you could probably just turn the traffic lights off and it would be absolutely fine. So this kind of control of traffic in the old way, it's part of the problem, because we need to move away from this sort of everything has to be controlled. You just let traffic find its way, but also you help pedestrians and cyclists. And you improve the quality of the air and the place, and reduce noise and speed, etc.
Something worth looking at, Charles. Thank you very much.
Could I just?
I'll leave you to your drink, Paul. Yes, go. You got 1 minute, Paul.
Okay, wait. So just try to take that forward, and just to say to Charles, because we have talked about that before, and I think I've seen some example designs. And Charles, we've now got ward budgets for projects that we can use. Maybe we can have a discussion. And if we could get an estimate of what a study like that might cost, we could look at putting in a submission to use ward budget at some point to actually do that. So maybe there's a way forward on that. We can.
Very good. Well, I will leave you to have a discussion with Charles. Very finally, Elizabeth, it's a statement more than a question. We do need to think about safety, particularly in dark areas. Make sure that the station feels safer and that it can act it positively, and perhaps also introduce CCTV. Right, we are done. We are done 1 minute early. Thank you so much to the councillors, and also thank you to those residents that have attended. I give you an absolute commitment. Your views will be taken seriously. They will be contained in the reports moving forward, and we will work with you to improve your high street. In the meantime, as the clock ticks 8 o'clock, have yourselves a very good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you all. And thank you, Paul.